And we're back here on Capitol tonight. If the governor goes through with the layoffs of about 3,500 PEF employees, that will cut the workforce by a little more than 6%. But for the other 94%, this vote means they actually get a pay raise. You see, when the public employee contracts run out in this state, the employees are guaranteed a raise in return for not going on strike. It's called the Triborough Amendment, and my next guest thinks it should be repealed. He is EJ McMahon, of the director of the Empire Center for New York State Policy. EJ, thanks for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
So this is kind of an obvious thing, but it's also a very interesting thing. You had a story in the New York Post kind of taking a look at how the fact that even though this contract was voted down, it was actually, in the long run, a better deal for some of the PEF members who voted no.
Oh, yes, and I'd like to correct one thing you said in the beginning. The Triborough Amendment and provision that keeps intact all parts of a contract even after it's expired is not in exchange for not going on strike. Strikes have been outlawed in New York State for 40 years.
That's true.
It's not connected to that at all. I mean, the unions say it is, but that's not in fact the case. This provision went into law about 30 years ago. It had been established in a series of Public Employment Relations Board and court rulings before that, and it's unique to New York in the extent of how far it reaches. And what it says is, when a contract expires, while you're negotiating a new contract, no matter how negotiations are going, all of the mandatory bargaining elements of the previous contract stay in effect.
Right.
Which means for many employees, I'm not sure how large a share, they continue to receive pay increases if they're on what's known as a step, progressing from the hiring rate to the job rate, or if they're due for a longevity increment. So basically, they keep everything they have, and they only, if they're in a situation where they're being asked to make concessions, well, it's pretty quick. The calculus pretty clearly is, well, I can only lose from this. And I think that was the calculus that was in the minds probably of many PEF members.
Now, that's actually, when you look at it from that point of view, that's actually kind of a selfish way of looking at it. I mean, this is something where you're looking at your own situation, thinking to yourself, okay, I've got a lot of tenure, and the person next to me maybe does not have a lot of tenure. Well, at least I'll be able to keep my step increase, essentially.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it selfish or self-interest. All of the incentives and everything we've got in our laws and in our economy are geared to people acting in their self-interest. Now, yes, they voted against this contract, most of the PEF members, knowing that it would force the layoffs of 3,500 of their colleagues. So much for union solidarity. But, as you pointed out at the outset, that's only a relatively small share of the total employment of the state. It'll be larger in this union. It'll be larger in some agencies than others. But there's a really kind of a heavy-handed irony to this outcome, because on the local level, for years, and with a special intensity ever since the tax cap was proposed and enacted, school districts and cities and counties have been pointing out they really want to repeal or modify the Triborough Amendment, because they have the same problem with it that the governor is now encountering. If the governor thinks he's got a problem, which is actually because of the Triborough Amendment primarily.
Right, this is the mandate of all mandates.
It's the labor mandate of all mandates, because it actually, if you're in a situation where you really need to find ways to restructure your deal and get savings, which is the situation we're in now, especially if there's going to be a pay freeze anyway, because remember, aside from the layoffs for PEF members, what this means is there won't be any base salary increase. Well, there wasn't going to be any base salary increase. The base salary is distinct from the increment. That wasn't going to happen anyway. If you're in a situation where you're offering then a freeze in the base salary, and you're saying, I want you to make a concession that's actually going to yield a net savings to us, the taxpayers, permanently in the future as part of this contract, the union you have no leverage over the union except threatening layoffs. On the local level, even more so than on the state level, layoffs mean a direct hit on services, because a larger share of local, municipal, county, and school district employees are involved in directly providing services to people. So we see that again and again, especially on the school district level, because the vast majority of school teachers spend almost their entire career with annual step increments. They have a pay schedule that has both what are known as steps and lanes that they move across if they get additional graduate credits. So school districts can find themselves spending 3 and 4% more per year on teachers even when there's supposedly a pay freeze. And again, their only way of eating the costs, if they've got fast rising health insurance expenses and other compensation costs, is to do layoffs. And they have had the same experience repeatedly in the past that the governors have.
Okay, but just to take the opposite track, play devil's advocate here for a second. I mean, you look at the contract deal, and I don't think there's anybody who would necessarily want to jump at the chance of taking 3 years of a pay freeze or 9 furlough days or pay more into their health insurance. Certainly in the private sector, when you're not unionized, you really don't have that option. You just kind of take it and deal with it, especially in this economy. But at the same time, though, so why would people want to vote yes on something like this? And also, I mean, is there the possibility that they were just calling the governor's bluff on these layoffs?
I don't think they're calling his bluff. I think the unions, the union leaders in the state and union members and active union members in the state are probably politically as shrewd as they come, and I think they can read the situation and know. If you size up Governor Cuomo by his history and by his general political posture, that if you think you're going to call his bluff and that it's a bluff, you're making a mistake. I don't think they thought it was a bluff. I think they were making a calculation, and I think the calculation for the majority of the union members was, I think I can do better than this. Now, I think they're making two mistakes. One is there's a prevalent conventional wisdom in Albany, which is wrong, which is that, well, in the past there's downturns and then things always bounce back and they'll be okay in the end. Secondly, the union leaders are already spreading the following narrative. Well, if you'd only do the millionaire tax or extend the millionaire tax, everything would be hunky-dory. I think they think mistakenly that they've got some sort of political and economic tide in their favor that is going to make for conditions that give them a better deal down the road. That's a miscalculation on their part, I think.
Okay, to that point, though, about the PEF leadership, Howard Glazer yesterday released a statement really kind of excoriating PEF's leadership, saying that they didn't explain the benefits of this contract to the rank and file. Is this viewed as a failure should this be viewed as a failure of PEF's leadership?
Well, I might not be the best person to ask, but I don't think so. I don't think it's a failure on the part of PEF's leadership. I think it's basically it's a statement about PEF's members and about how they view the situation. But by the way, those who voted for the contract, I think they were making a different economic and political calculation, and they also were showing a bit of altruism. They didn't want to cost the jobs of their colleagues. But I don't think it hurts, from what I can tell, PEF's leadership so much that this happened. PEF's leadership agreed to this deal, and basically I interpreted it at this time as them saying, okay, you push this deal through with CSEA, you think we ought to be doing this, we're going to send it to our members and see how they feel. And now they've seen how the members feel.
Should there be more pressure applied to the governor? And I know some Republican lawmakers have come up with this notion that, and we talked to Ed Cox yesterday, that the governor hasn't used his political capital, essentially the clout that he's built up over the years, to really make structural changes in state government, like the ones you're talking about, like with Triborough. Should the governor, and do we expect to see the governor maybe move forward in the next year or so to make these kind of structural reforms to the way we spend money and to the way state workers are negotiated with?
Well, I mean, if he doesn't, it's going to be costly for him and for state and for local taxpayers. As far as Republican lawmakers talking about it, outside some members of the Republican Assembly Conference, I'm not aware that any member of the Senate on the Republican side has stepped forward and carved out a profile of courage of any sort on this either. I think most lawmakers in both parties are looking toward the governor and are looking for him to lead on issues that are structural, such as Triborough, such as minimal contributions to health insurance for all public employees, which has been done in New Jersey and Massachusetts, such as reform of compulsory arbitration, which drives up the cost of police and firefighters. He has, and these are the key mandate relief pieces.
But doing those structural changes in other states that we've seen in New Jersey, Wisconsin, Ohio, elsewhere, have become really kind of a match point or a striking point for a lot of national union labor concerns.
Well, yes.
Is that too? I guess essentially is what I'm asking is that too much heat for the governor to take on?
Well, tough talk will only get you so far, and posturing will only get you so far. If you need to save money and you realize you need to restructure public employee compensation in a way that makes it more affordable and sustainable in the long run, you have to remember, unions don't exist to make sacrifices. Nobody has ever been elected president of a union running on the slogan, "Vote for me, I'll be reasonable." That's not the way it works. They exist to relentlessly promote the self-interest of their members, period. That's not wrong. It's not so much a matter of right or wrong. That's what they do. That's what the incentive is set up for. And if you have a set of rules and collective bargaining provisions that actually tilt the bargaining table in their favor, they will naturally exploit it. Not because they're bad people, because they're doing what the incentives are set up for them to do, and they will push their own interests as hard as they can. And again, I think the PEF members, again, allowing for the fact that obviously, you know, if they don't care that much about the members being laid off, putting aside the layoffs, from their narrow point of view, although I think they misjudged the political and economic situation, I understand why many of them thought that this was in their best interest, that they had nothing to lose, and in fact, they would avoid a loss of a certain extent by voting against the contract.
All right, EJ, we're out of time. Thanks very much for coming on.
You're welcome.